Hello, hello. Thank you for joining me for another page in an altered book. Here is what we are working on today. Look how fun. I'm starting out by just covering the entire page with Mod Podge and torn book text. This will make the page thicker. Obviously, I do have a few pages already stuck together on the page that I am working on to make it even more sturdy. But by applying this method, you get to bond with the piece even more and put even more on so that it gives it a little more tooth. And speaking of tooth, I've applied a generous amount of white gesso, and I'm smoothing that all over the page with a palette knife. Look at that yummy texture that just was created by smushing those two pages together. And I actually have not let that gesso dry. I am adding our first layer of paint here, and I'm going to push that around with the palette knife. And here's our second layer of paint, just a darker shade of green. And going in again with that palette knife. So I actually have let that layer, the paint layer dry, and I'm now adding some torn magazine pages, colored magazine pages in various shades of green, and laying over with Mod Podge. And again, after letting that layer of Mod Podge dry, I'm now going in and roughing things up and scuffing it all up with sandpaper. Wiping all that ick off the page. I say ick, I don't know, the dust. And then with this Tim Holtz Distress Oxide, I'm just rubbing this pad up and down the page just to give even more color in there. And these Distress Oxides are not waterproof or water resistant at all, so now it's basically like game over for any Mod Podge that I may want to put over top. And I did let the Distress Oxide dry a bit before going in with this little alphabet stamp and this Stays on ink. And I'm just creating more noise on that background. And here I am giving a nice spritz of the Dilutions Shimmer Spray. And again, with most of the other layers, I am letting this dry. I'm trying to accelerate the process, but yeah. And here is my main image that I'll be using for my focal point. I've got a cutting mat laid on my workspace, and I'm using a little X-Acto to cut out my image rather than using scissors. And you know what? It's artist choice on this one. Sometimes I prefer scissors, sometimes I don't. With fine little intricate details, I find that the X-Acto is a better choice for me. And then here we've got a Tim Holtz butterfly which are quite thick, and they have a white border around the edge, which you could see that I was cutting that out and now applying with just a regular old glue gun, and I'm actually altering my focal point. So here's a little flower that I cut out from a flower book that I do have, and I'm just adding some interest and dimension, and I'm creating my own piece of art off of multiple images. So now you can see my mind sort of kind of went on a rampage here with all these different pieces that I've decided to use. And it's just amazing how much a piece or an image or all these things can really transform by just adding subtle changes. I mean, I haven't changed much about this. I haven't added a whole lot to it, but look at look at what happens. Even with adding that mouth, and especially those glasses and those eyes, that's just so much fun. Here's another flower from that flower book. Look at how fun that is. I just love it. And here, as I mentioned earlier, the Distress Oxide, and mostly like everything that is on the page now, cannot have any sort of liquid over top of it because it will move the pigment around. That's not what I want. So I am adding Mod Podge to the back of my entire focal point. And I'm just obviously on top of my my cutting mat. And placing my focal image onto my page and pressing firmly down, working out any wrinkles and bubbles and all that. And I am spitting and smudging and grunging things up a bit on my focal point with a Stabilo pencil. You can see straight away how dingy things start to look when you start grunging it up with that pencil. I just love it. And then I'm adding some fun little dots with my white Posca paint pen. Look at it, brings out, it just draws the eye to certain places that you weren't exactly even focusing on before. And now I am actually adding Mod Podge to the back of a large little saying that I found from a magazine. Here's another one I've applied. And now here I am adding some more dots with the black Posca ink pen, and then using my sandpaper to grunge it up even more. And I'm using that black StazOn ink again around the edges and to make the whole piece even darker. Thank you for watching. Again, if you have time and if you enjoyed, please consider subscribing and ringing that bell to be notified anytime I upload new videos.